All right, so welcome, Craig Macallister.
Hello.
So I wanted to go over this article in the Miami Herald recently, Why Students Who Do Well in High School Bomb in College. This, as you had mentioned, also connects with the SAT. Would you elaborate your thoughts on the article?
Yeah, the article talks about how some students who basically have the same experience in high school, same background, same basic grades, even same test, SAT type scores, do well in college and others bomb out. And so what's the reason for that? A big reason for that is, at least according to the author of the article, some people, whether it's genetic or for whatever other reason, are naturally strivers, meaning that they work hard. Sort of the idea is maybe that they're more self-motivated. They're willing to put in the time to do extra work. The amount of study that the article talked about that they did was not a huge amount more, a couple, 2-3 hours a week or something to that extent. But over the course of a semester, that really adds up. These are students who get the work, they come home and they do it right away. They don't procrastinate. They don't cram until the very end. And this is as opposed to the other students who aren't quite strivers, who are more slackers, would be a word that I would use.
Sliders, as the article
Sliders
puts.
is what they say. Yes, there's the word, sliders. They let it slide, right? They procrastinate. They don't study. They go play video games or whatever. I think we all know the type. Maybe some of us even were those types when we were in school. And so then when it comes down to exam time, they haven't put in the work and they don't do as well. Some people are more hardworking than others, or at least are more motivated to be hardworking than others. And that's a big difference between students. What goes into that? What types of people are more motivated than others? There probably are a lot of different factors that play into that.
And video games also don't preclude someone from doing well. I used to play a lot of video games.
Absolutely, so did I.
But I was still hitting the books pretty hard from a pretty young age. One of the specific things that the article mentions is that it's 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So the students who went off to college, they made concessions for 3 extra hours that they were going to be studying in their dorm, etc., for college, because they know that college is another level above high school. It's more rigorous.
Yes.
And the students that you're competing with, they're just probably more competitive.
Right.
In most cases, I would say. So that's what separates. A lot of it is just the time investment and the respect for the rigor.
Right.
And that's probably the same for the SAT, no?
I agree. I think that when you get to college, and I know this having taught college students, you have some students, they're away from home and or they're away from the high school environment. I'm not going to say that you get more coddled in high school, but you have more constant attention. Your teachers in high school are more, they're teachers, but they're also kind of watching over you. They're in the role of parents during the daytime. When you get to college, your professors that's not their responsibility. You're an adult at that point. They are not there to coddle you. They're not there to make sure that you're in class every day. They're not there to chase you down for your homework. The attitude of a college professor, more often than not, I having been one before, know this, is if you're not going to do the work, that's fine. That's on you to not do the work, right? I'm just going to give you a poor grade. I can push you a couple times and give you a warning, say, hey, look, your grade is this is where you are, but I'm not going to be on you every day for that because that's not my responsibility. You're an adult. When you're in high school, it's a little bit different. So that's why it's more self-motivation. The people who are strivers, they don't get the constant feedback or pressure from a professor saying, you need to do your homework, and they still do it. Whereas the sliders, they don't get that constant pushback and motivation, so they just keep letting it slide because a lot of times they figure everything is okay. And then it comes to midterm time or it comes to the end of the semester and they're like, oh, crap, I didn't know my grade was this bad because you weren't constantly telling me that, right? And so there's a different sort of environment between the two places. Now, with the SAT, a lot of SAT prep is self-motivation. You do give your parents. Parents want their kids to do well in the SAT so they can go to really good schools. But at the end of the day, a parent can only push you so far. You have to have that motivation. You have to be a striver. You have to want to get that good score so you can go to a good school and do really well academically. A lot of that is self-motivated. There's some of it's peer pressure too, if you're with the peer group that cares about these things, and there are some in high school that do and some that don't. If you're in that peer group, you'll probably be motivated to study more and do a little bit better. But I think just the basic way that this correlates to the SAT, this may sound really obvious, but by working hard and preparing as well as you can, putting in that extra time, put in those 3 hours extra a week to prepare for the SAT, and you're going to do better. You're going to do better on the tests. I think it's almost invariably you're going to do better on the tests. Some people that 3 hours will help more than others, but across the board, your scores will go up if you study with the proper material, proper attitude, and if you get the proper assistance, if you take a good SAT class or get some tutoring from people who understand the test, that will help you out.
And there are a lot of resources on the internet, and there are a lot of books, obviously. These research are from the University of Toronto. Now, I always remember correlation does not equal causation, etc. But they did mention that students from more disadvantaged backgrounds, part of the study was they offered these kids a marshmallow and said the kids who ate the marshmallow immediately or quickly tended to score lower on the SAT.
Right.
Whereas the students that were able to be conscientious and sacrifice, which is what study is, which is what the extra 3 hours is, a sacrifice, right? Because you don't have your parents there to keep you on task. But students from more disadvantaged backgrounds, they might have more of a scarcity mentality. Like, there's food in front of me, I'm going to eat it because I don't have a lot of food around me all the time. So there's a lot of environmental factors that might come into play. So what's really important that I always remember is to focus on the individual, number one, but also number two is for educators and for tutors and just for people in these communities to make sure to encourage that individual, but at the same time to not coddle them. It's kind of like what you're saying. You don't want to patronize them, but at the same time, you want to make some concessions. One of the things that I always encourage when I work with students is I encourage them to have a little bit of defiance. Like, I belong here. Like, I had some rowdy friends in high school, really close friends in high school, just happened to live a couple blocks away from me, so we ended up walking to school together and becoming really good friends. We weren't connected academically. We were very different, but I stayed focused and I found some academic friends as well, but it doesn't mean that I lost that group of friends. So I think that's a lot of it is that the individual needs to feel a sense of defiance, a little bit of a sense of defiance, like I belong here. So no matter what, whether you have no one in your family went to college, so there's no mentors or people think you're being too big for your britches because you're really smart and you want to do well in your SATs and you want to dream about going to this school or that school or majoring in this or having this great career, having this great life, this great future. People are going to try to push you off that rock. I really encourage a little bit of defiance. And I also think that that defiance will keep you from, not to get too off on a tangent, but that defiance will keep you from imploding on yourself. If things get really difficult as you get older. It's just like, well, no, I belong here.
I think in school, as with anything else in life, you have to face adversity and overcome it. I mean, everybody, from an academic standpoint,
True.
I mean, even the best students, you know, you have a paper that doesn't go well for some reason. And if you're a self-doubter or if you're naturally a self-doubter, you'll see, I got a C on this paper and the guy next to me got an A, you know, and then if you get down on yourself and you don't tough it out, you can get discouraged. And sometimes if you're not tough-minded enough, you can let that really influence your studies. And then you get frustrated and it can spiral from there. I'm not saying you go from the end of that 1C paper to, to living on the street.
It's exactly right. But it might have a mental effect on you. It seems like the only solution that I always came up with was just work harder. Because nobody has more time than anyone else.
Right.
I mean, there might be mitigating circumstances, but we all get 24 hours in a day.
Right.
Whether you're 5 years old or 55 years old. So I think that's what gives you the confidence as you get older and you take more challenging classes and you step into a test like the SAT. Is just that work ethic. And I think that that's really important to reiterate because I think it's real easy for people to, especially now because the internet is so ubiquitous, for example, and YouTube, etc. You just think, oh, you make a YouTube channel and you're going to get rich.
Right.
There might be a subconscious voice in your head saying, oh, I don't have to work that hard anymore. Right. It's easy to get rich or it's easy to get famous or whatever. But those guys are working 100 hours a week.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say is people might think that and think that it looks like there are ways to get rich easy. But I guarantee you, if you look into the background of just about every really successful person, you're going to find some hard work and you're going to find some adversity.
Failure.
Adversity that they had to overcome. You don't see it at the time that they're rich and famous because they're beyond that at that point, but they had to overcome something and get there. And I think that any student, you know, having taught in college before, not any student, but the vast majority of students who are in college, if they put in hard work, they can do well. Not every student can get a 4.0. I mean, not everybody has that.
No, I agree with that.
Has that in them. Just like not every person who takes the SAT, no matter how hard they work and how hard they study, is going to be able to get 800s on all the subjects. But
even close.
Or even close.
Yeah.
But you need to find that zone. Find that zone to strive for. You know, whether you're the type of person who a 550 on one of the subjects is a good score for. I mean, there's no shame in that number. You can go to a really good school, you know, and work really hard when you get there with that kind of score. If you have to work a little bit harder than somebody else to get there, put in the work and do it. Especially with the SAT, it's a one time. A lot of people take it 3 to 4 times, but you don't take it that many times. So this is your opportunity. You need to put in some time time to do better on it, and then you're past it. Then you have to worry about the SAT ever again. Once you get good scores on it, then you just have to worry about studying and working really hard in college. But that's another story. That's the story with the article that we're talking about.
Yes.
Here. But yeah, I mean, hard work works wonders. I mean, I had friends when I was in college who were C students, and they took classes with me, and I would study with them. You know, I get them to work a little bit harder than they work some other times, and they get B's, and they'd be amazed and be like, oh, so you get really good grades? You know, I could do it too if I really wanted to. And I'd say, yeah, you could.
Yep.
You could.
That's exactly
You know,
right.
if you're willing to work 3 or 4 or 5 extra hours a week, you could do it. But a lot of times they just slide back into getting C's because they were happy and content with that.
And I think a lot of it is there has to be a thesis in your head. I always had this, even though I didn't have the most ideal environment growing up. It was pretty decent, but it wasn't the most ideal that I've seen in other households. But I was always working hard. But I think I always thought that even when I was a kid, if I work really hard, I'm going to have a better life. The people that I see who are strivers, if you talk to them, that's exactly the way they think.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know how I'm going to have a better life.
Right.
I just know it's going to help me have a better life.
Right.
It cannot hurt for me to work hard.
Working hard does not guarantee that you're going to have a better life, but not working hard, if you come from a normal background, will guarantee that you won't improve your life.
All but guarantee that it's going to be more challenging. So why not, since you have time, since you're being encouraged, why not put in that work ethic? So just encouraging all 3 of those people listening to work hard. But yeah, okay, so I want to get into a little bit of SAT nitty-gritty, Craig.
All right.
Okay, so on the math SAT, it's very important that you remember that you've got to be clinical and disciplined about this test. You got to be as clinical and disciplined about this test as you can be. For example, if you normally line everything up, and I always encourage people to line everything up, like the equal signs. I don't move things around, and I always show my work. I highly encourage that. Build a machine is how I encourage folks to attack the SAT. Very similar to taking an actual test, but the SAT even more so, right? Again, it goes back to your hard work. If you're working really hard in school and you have these processes and these habits that are good habits, showing your work, etc., or if you're super bright and rarely make silly mistakes, you don't have to show your work. Or if your teacher doesn't mind if you don't show your work, which is pretty rare in math, they usually want you to show your work. So these are all things to consider. So you want to sort of attack the exam where you're looking at the question and you're saying, okay, how am I going to write this? Am I going to write this algebraically? If so, am I going to show my work? Do I need to? And just lining everything up. And that's where I think a lot of the work ethic plays out on the test, because if you're used to doing thousands of math problems, all of your homework that you're supposed to do over the years, you're not going to be so alarmed when a specific type of problem comes across your desk on this test. There's a few interesting caveats to the SAT that I want to encourage students to think about. And that is, there are some times where you shouldn't write anything down at all. If you're looking at a question and, for example, if it's an algebraic equation with an equal sign, you might not have to write anything down. The biggest advice that I would give would be on the math side to make sure not to miss the easy ones. So if you know when you read the question, this is easy, I need to get it right, then whatever the path is, whether it's writing it down, not writing it down, etc., make sure you get that one right. Would you agree, Craig?
I agree. I mean, but the ones that seem easy, you should get them right, but that means you still have to give your full focus.
True,
and
and
to them,
that's exactly
you can make
right.
Mistakes easier.
That's exactly
on them.
right.
You can tend to make a mistake by overlooking something.
That's exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned that. You want to make sure that each step is correct. Maybe even take the few extra seconds to write down the steps, because you're like, this is so straightforward and easy in my brain. I need to get this right.
Right.
So being extra conscientious. The article talks about that word too, conscientious.
Right.
That's what separates strivers from divers. Right. And this, I think, would fall into that camp. And also, if your grades aren't that hot, you could make up for it with an amazing SAT score.
You can. Yes, you can.
And also, elite colleges like to see both high SAT and high grades preferably. So it's still important to consider performing as well as you can, obviously, in high school. But a high SAT score can definitely open some doors. So it's another opportunity for you to prove to the admissions counselors that you can compete in the collegiate world.
It can make up for some shortcomings during your high school career. I mean, if you have a 1.0...
Good luck.
It'll good luck.
It won't have a factor at all.
Right.
But if you got a couple of C's, because your grandfather died and you guys were really close and it was 10th grade and you write an essay about that, there are factors. And we won't talk about too much about admissions counselors right now. This is focused on the SAT and on that article, but they still want to see in general your grades going up. And obviously, 10th and 11th grade are the most important years.
They want you to finish well. Going along with what you were just saying, the harder that you work at learning these things, you're speaking specifically on the math, but for everything else too, the more work that you put into it, the more used to seeing these types of questions you are, then obviously the easier it's going to be for you. The quicker you're going to be able to get through them efficiently and effectively and move on to the next question. I mean, that applies to reading and writing as well. The more used to reading and considering what the main idea of the things you're reading in school are and looking for important parts of books or passages or whatever, the better you're going to be able to do it on the actual SAT. The more that you write and that you know grammar rules, from practice or from seeing them, the easier it's going to be to learn the SAT grammar rules or even if you don't take a specific SAT class, to find the best written sentence out of 4 sentences that they give you. The more you see well-written sentences and you practice writing them, the easier it's going to be for you to see them. It's just like in athletics, right? The more that you practice a specific part of the game or a specific action, you do the same thing over and over and over again.
That's exactly right.
And
There's
you get better at it. And then it becomes second nature to you. So it's hard work, right?
That's exactly right. I want to have a little bit of fun now.
You're not going to ask me math questions.
I'm not going to ask you math questions, Craig. I'm gonna share. Yeah,
I'm a historian.
You're a historian. I know. You're still our grammar guy, though. You're a grammar stud. I definitely want to share this. So, just as an example, they give you the reference of area of a circle, triangle, trapezoid, sphere, etc. But a lot of it you should really know. Mm-hmm. Like if you can know all of these things, it's much more helpful, right? So, just like simple little things. For example, is it pi r squared or 2 pi r? When you're thinking about the circumference or the area. Well, what's bigger? If you multiply something by 2 or if you square it? But let's say a whole number, for example. Mm-hmm. Like where does it become a lot bigger, faster to square it?
Right.
So obviously pi r squared is going to be the area of a circle and 2 pi r is going to be the circumference of a circle. And the same thing with a cylinder, for example. The area of a cylinder is, do you know what the area of a cylinder is? All right, I'll give you one quiz question. Okay, so it's pi r squared, which is the area of the circle. So picture like a Campbell's soup can. It's the area of that circle on top, and then times the height. It's just a whole bunch of circles on top of one another. So just think about conceptually.
Right, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Well, with all these other ones, and then also the special right triangles. So the 30, 60, 90, I always remembered it as x radical 3 and 2x. And how I remembered it was there's 3 different numbers. There's a 1, 2, and a 3. So the multiplier is 1, 2, and 3. And then x is obviously the smallest angle. And then x radical 3 is going to be x times about 1.7. And then 2x is going to be x times 2. So you're going to say, okay, so there's 2 things to remember there. There's a 1, a 2, and a 3, which are your multipliers for the 30, 60, and the 90. And then if you get confused, you're thinking, okay, well, square root of 3 is less than 2. It's like 1.7. So that's how I know it's like, okay, the side opposite the 30-degree angle is going to be x. The side opposite the 60-degree angle is x radical 3. And the side opposite the 90-degree angle is 2x. So just as an example. But I think that it's important that students conceptually truly understand the math in their head and these concepts in their brains so they can quickly get to the solutions, get down there as fast as possible, as opposed to just, I'll wing it, or I'll look it up.
They're going to give it to me anyways.
Much better. Yeah, it's much better if you truly, because there aren't that many in terms of the reference. There's about
they may not
12 geometric shapes.
Right.
Yeah. So if you can conceptually, how does my brain remember this?
Right.
Quickly.
Right. If you understand it better rather than having to go back and look something up, that'll help you in the long run anyways, but time-wise, you're not going to have to keep paging back.
Exactly.
Right? You're going to know it, you're going to see it, and you're going to know it, and time is cliche. Time is of the essence when you're taking the SAT. I mean, because you do have a limited amount of time, and they have it figured out pretty well. You may take a practice and get through with 10 minutes to square, but when you're in the actual environment of the exam and you're trying to get every single question right, the amount of time they give you is just enough.
That's exactly right. Also, one of the things that I want to remind folks is on the math questions, when you're doing simultaneous equations, like 3x plus 4y equals negative 11, and then negative x minus 3y equals 27, and then you have to solve for x and y, right? You can either do substitution, where you solve for x or y in one of the equations, and then take what's on the other side of the x equals negative 4y minus 27, take that negative 4y minus 27, plug it in place of x in the second equation, then solve for y. And then you solve for x by plugging in the y to either one equation. The other way would be to have a multiplier, right? So if it's like 4x plus 2y equals negative 11, and then it's negative x plus 7y equals 13, the bottom one you can multiply by 4, because now you have 4x plus negative 4x, and then the x is canceled, and you solve for y. So you can combine those equations mathematically. So those are the two methods. But here's the caveat is like let's say you solve for x, and x equals 3. Look at your solutions.
Right.
And a lot of times on the SAT, definitely on the new SAT practice book, the official study guide, if x equals 3, there might only be one answer where x equals 3.
That's the
so
right
if
answer.
you're certain that x equals 3, don't solve for y.
Right.
You're wasting time.
Right.
There are things that you might be encouraged to do in a real classroom for your teacher that actually is the wrong move on the SAT.
On the SAT, yes.
And there's actually questions on the SAT, math questions, it's very obvious that you shouldn't write stuff down.
Right.
Where you could do it in 3 seconds by just focusing on quick math, quick multiplication, quick division, and then solving it quickly without writing all this stuff down. And that saves you 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 60 seconds.
When they make these tests, they know how long questions are going to take. They know, math and in the other sections too, this is a question that students can save time on. And this is a question that's going to take them a couple minutes. They factor that in. So when you get to those questions that you're supposed to save time on, you better make sure you save time on them. Because if you don't, if you spend a minute solving a question that they figure is going to take you 12 seconds to 15 seconds to solve, you've thrown away 45 seconds that you're supposed to be spending on one of these more intricate, more involved questions. That goes for the reading section too. You have these questions that are, in line 14, what does this word mean? An easy strategy to figuring that out is to take the word out of the sentence and in your head come up with the word that you think is supposed to go there and then look at the answers and find the synonym or the word itself if it appears there. And if the exact word that you thought of as the replacement is there and you understood the sentence, that's the right answer and move on. And those are questions that's supposed to take you a short amount of time because there are going to be other questions that are going to require you to read a whole paragraph again and to read all 4 choices and think about it, right? So where you have the opportunity to save time and move quickly through it and do it correctly, like with the question that you're talking about and with the example I just gave, you need to do that and save your time to waste your energies somewhere else where you need to spend more time, more energy.
And as well, on the math side, when you have I equals the square root of -1, how do you get rid of I? You've got to find ways to square it. So let's say you have 2 plus 5i over 7 minus 3i. You need to simplify this. What you need to do is, and this shows up on the SAT, and there's no reference that talks about it, so you've got to be able to remember how to solve these. You're going to find the denominator's conjugate, not the numerator, the denominator's conjugate. So the conjugate of 7 minus 3i is 7 plus 3i. So you're going to do 2 plus 5i over 7 minus 3i times 7 plus 3i over 7 plus 3i. So all we're doing is multiplying by 1.
Right.
Doesn't change the fraction, but if you FOIL all that, you get rid of your i's and you're able to solve, or at least to simplify all the way through. And that gets you an equation. It doesn't completely get rid of the i's, but it gets you an equation that the correct answer will be one of the choices on the SAT. So it's all about the denominator's conjugate, multiplying by the denominator's conjugate. For example, 7 plus 3i is the conjugate of 7 minus 3i. The last thing I wanted to say about the math.
I think my math score has gone up at least 50 points.
These are small tips.
These are helpful.
These are small tips. This isn't like world-changing advice here.
Yeah, but if you can figure out a couple tips and a couple strategies, it will move your score up. You see these things in practice and you're used to doing them, then it'll be easier for you when you actually take a real test.
The students that invariably have the most challenges with math, there are multiple reasons, but a lot of it is just the foundation. I think a lot of it is emotional. I think it's very important that you block out all negative thoughts. So it's like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, and block everyone else out too. Like Johnny doesn't like me or Sally doesn't like me or whatever. Block all that stuff out. Like I know it's difficult, but that's super important when you're studying, when you're reading,
Absolutely.
when you're in the SAT, etc. Because that doesn't serve you well at all. You want to block out all negative thoughts and clear your mind and then accept the information in and just focus on, can I learn this problem? Can I improve by solving this problem correctly?
Right.
And then try to do it again and try to do it again. If you have questions, to go find out, okay, this is a question. It's an even number in the back of the book. And so I don't know. And you know what? I don't care. No, go figure out.
Exactly.
Go talk to the smart kid one of the smart kids in your class. Go talk to your smart girlfriend. Go talk to your teacher. Go talk to your mom. Go find out every single answer that you don't know, especially in math. Go solve the problem.
Yeah.
Go find out the right answer.
You shouldn't, if you really want to do well in the SAT, you should never walk away from a question that you got wrong without putting the maximum amount of effort into figuring out why you got it wrong and how you could have gotten it right. Even if you're just using the SAT book and you read the explanation and you don't understand it at first, read it again.
Yeah.
Ask somebody.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, ask a teacher, ask a tutor, say, okay, I didn't get this explanation in my official SAT book. I didn't understand why this wasn't the right choice.
Yep.
Don't just give up on it. That's how you learn, because then somebody might be able to point out to you something that you don't, these brief explanations that you don't understand. And I'm sure with math being such a foundational subject where the foundation is really important, maybe if you're struggling a bit, you do need to go back and get a little bit of extra help.
I'm glad you mentioned that, the extra help, and not feeling like it's remedial.
Right, exactly.
If you need to study your times tables and you're 15 years old, study your times tables.
Exactly,
Just do it. Block off, turn your phone off, turn the internet off, spend 2 hours a day for 2 weeks, whatever you have to do, and just buttress that part, because that's going to show up. That will be a fly in your ointment. And you mentioned that. Yeah, you're right. Like, math builds on itself so much, and it's so important that if you're not really good at fractions, if you're not really good at polynomials, if you're not solid at working with imaginary numbers, at least to be able to multiply by the denominator's conjugate, then you've got to go back and study that.
Right.
FOIL and simultaneous equations, and obviously the XY plane, the Cartesian plane, being able to work with XY coordinates and slope-intercept form. There's not a lot of point-slope form, but it might show up. But you still have to know what the y-intercept is. Right. Is the y-intercept when x is 0 or when y is 0? Well, here's the easy way to remember that. It's when the line or the figure intercepts the y-axis, because it intercepts the y-axis. Well, the y, when you make your mouth long, it's a y, so that's why I remembered it was a y. And then the x is more like a horizon. It's kind of like a sun thing. So the x is the horizontal axis and the y is the vertical axis. So you're like, okay, well, let me think of a point on the y-axis. That would be 0, because you got to run before you can fly, right? So it'd be 0. Let's say it's 0, 2. So it's going to be 0 across on the x-axis running across, and then it's going to be 2 straight up. It's the y value when x is 0. So the b-intercept is the y value when x is 0. So just little things. If you can know conceptually and algebraically why something is true, then you figured that out. But the easiest way to figure that out is obvious. It's doing a lot of problems. Lots of problems. Right. And that's why these strivers tend to perform better on the SAT. Right. That's why it's rare that an F student just walks into the SAT and just slaughters it and gets a 2380. It's just really, really rare, because it takes that kind of diligence and the learning how to learn and the acquisition of knowledge where these answers are quick and these concepts that you understand are quick.
Yes.
The test is about stamina.
Yes.
And they don't test you on new stuff. The SAT, I've been told over and over and over again, they test you on what you're supposed to know.
Exactly. It's not supposed to be anything new. It's not supposed to be anything out of the realm of your ability to understand it. It's things that you've learned in school. You're supposed to know before you go to college. So the more that you've actually tried to learn those things and worked hard doing, whether they're math problems or reading the types of articles or books or doing the writing and the grammar that go along with those things, the more that you've worked at it, the more that you've paid attention to criticism and comments that your teachers have given you about your failings or your level of success doing those things, generally speaking, the better that you're going to do on the SAT. I mean, it's not a huge stretch to say that the vast majority of people who push 800 in certain sections on the SAT are the same kids who have high grades in school. I mean, there's a direct correlation. That doesn't mean that that's always the case, because it's not, but more often than not it is. And in high school, those kids are kids who work hard or at least are pushed to work hard by their parents, and so they do it. Now, when they go to college, they may not be pushed by their parents anymore, and this is where you see the disparity between the kids who are willing to put in the work and the kids who slide, right? But, I mean, at least for preparing for the SAT, hard work, grit, determination, all these things. I mean, you may be rolling your eyes when you hear me say this right now. I sound like a football coach, again, with a little bit lower voice. But they are important. It does carry through, right?
And just another thing is just an appetite for learning. I think just, even though I might sound like really trite, but it's just that curiosity. It's knowing that, like, okay, I had 40 problems assigned to me. I did all of them. I checked the back of the book. All the odd ones were right. There were 6 even ones that I didn't get, but I put an answer, and that's fine. And my teacher's not going to correct it anyways. That's another thing that I hear a lot. Oh, my teacher's not going to correct it anyways. Okay. Yeah. Like, I want a doctor who didn't care if their teacher checked. It's about that pride. It's about the pride of, why not? Why not work hard? Why not go all the way? Why not try to do as well as I can on this assignment? Because if I'm going to spend 45 minutes on it, I might as well spend an hour on it and do it extremely well. When you're confident, there's a reason why your teachers assign you specific problems. they're not doing it because they're bored. They're doing it because it's going to show up on the test.
Exactly.
It's going to show up next year for the next teacher that's teaching the next class, Algebra 2, trigonometry. They're doing this for a reason.
Right.
So why wouldn't you want to try to understand every single problem?
So even if they don't grade it or you got it right, but you don't understand how, you should try to get it right and understand how to do it, because it's going to build on that when you go forward. And so if you get to some point where you figure, well, I did okay on this when I was in high school. I didn't really understand it that well, but I did okay. Well, later on in math, it's going to come back, right? Okay, yeah, you slid by with that grade earlier on, but then when something builds on top of that, then your foundation is not there and your house of math is going to crumble on you.
It really will.
I mean, so you need to make sure that you understand these things.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I'm an English guy, but I've always been passionate about math for the opposite reasons of English, right? With English and writing and communication, you can develop such a beautiful story or an argument, paint a picture. You have a lot of room, but it's also very gray, whereas math is very black and white. It's the answer's right or wrong. And so there's beauty in both. I think there really, really is. But when it comes to math, it's always important to me that, and I'm not knocking teachers at all. It's a very tough job. I don't know if I could do it. It's a tough job. I don't know if I could do it as well as some of these teachers do it now. I'm, more one-on-one or small groups, etc. But when people say, oh, well, I had a bad 5th grade math teacher or I had a bad 7th grade math teacher, I'm not trying to cut the teachers slack, but who cares?
Right. Yeah.
Seriously, who cares? Everyone has probably had at least one quote-unquote bad math teacher throughout their whole life, but you have to power through it. And that's why you want to be even more vigilant. Ask questions, show up early, make them like you, even if you don't like them. Get to know the smart students, ask them, sit next to them, focus more, study more, find resources online, find other math books, make sure you get all the problems right. It's really easy to say, oh, I had a bad 5th grade math teacher, so and then sometimes a student might think, oh, I had a bad 5th grade math teacher, my life is ruined. I can't study computer science anymore, my life is ruined. Or I can't study physics and become a physicist. Because what you said, Craig, it builds so strongly, it's really important that you have that solid foundation. So I just want to encourage folks listening to be very vigilant. No matter how good or bad your teacher is, you are the student. You have to take accountability for your decisions and your work.
I mean, having a bad 5th or 7th grade math teacher goes back
or 10th grade.
Or 10th grade goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, adversity. And the students who are willing to be tough and be determined and take on and overcome adversity and work hard to do it are the ones who are strivers and will succeed. Okay, so you had a whole year of math that was not taught very well. It doesn't mean you didn't learn anything in that year. Take what you learned, build on it, work hard and try to relearn or learn again or learn it better than you learned it under the poor teacher. I mean, everybody can make excuses about something that holds them back in one way or another in their life, but the people who are successful are the people who don't let those excuses really hold them back and really keep them from doing what they want to do academically or, any other endeavor really.
Well, yeah, now 2016, it's pretty exciting to see Khan Academy. There are a lot of really great resources online. Also, read the examples in your book. Really flip through, make sure that you understand because those examples are there to help you. Then they show their work in a lot of these examples. So just really patiently look through the book. Like even the 40 problems, you go through the 40 problems, but those 40 problems are going to be written on 5 pages. Those 5 pages, a few of those pages might have examples on them. So look at those examples closely. And there's a reason why they show you different examples. They're not going to show you 3 of the same type of problems. There's going to be a little flourish. Something's going to be different. You're going to have to distribute a negative here, and then you're going to have to work with fractions here, and you're going to have to work with exponents here, or subtract exponents. It's not like they're going to put the same examples, the same exact types of problems. So really be patient when you're looking at those examples.
I agree, yes. And one of the other things, too, I want to say is you mentioned 2016, the year that we're in. Nowadays, for an older guy like me, it just blows my mind how many resources are out there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You can find anything. You can find a lot of bad stuff. You can find a lot of crap online, but you can find a lot of good stuff too.
It's true.
You can find a lot of learning resources online or in books that you can buy, whether electronically, digitally, or the actual book itself. They can really help you. Real lessons on math or other subjects that if you're willing to put in the time and do the research, because it does involve some research to sort of sift through what's good and what's bad and what's helpful and what's not. I'm not saying that you can teach yourself, but you can do some of that. You can learn on your own to some extent. It doesn't hurt to have good teachers and good tutors helping you out along the way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But yeah, in terms of the math SAT, that's all I got for today, Craig.
All right. Well,
that's all she wrote.
Like I said, maybe my math score went up a good 70 or 80 points today. At least I'm glad I don't have to take the math part of the SAT soon.
So yes, I encourage everyone, let's be strivers, not divers.
Agreed.